Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for attending this session. I'm here today to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, and that's data. That might sound a little weird, but I'm an analytics guy. I love data, and I think it's really, really important. And I hope at the end of this that you will agree as well. So a quick introduction about me. My name is Karl. I'm with Accenture, part of our applied intelligence organization. That's kind of a fancy way to say analytics, but really the broader context of analytics. So not just reports or graphs or that kind of stuff, but the whole spectrum. So data and machine learning and artificial intelligence, the whole thing put together. And that's what we call our applied intelligence practice. So I'm a senior principal within that organization. I've been doing analytics work for over 15 years with Accenture. Almost all of that has been focused on Oracle's analytics product. So I'm very familiar with the spectrum all the way back to the Siebel Analytics days. Didn't quite go back before that to the Inquirer days, but I've been doing it for a long, long time. And I'm very excited about the direction that Oracle has been moving recently with their analytics products. Fun fact, I haven't gotten a haircut in about four months now. So you might be able to tell that from my picture on my profile, versus what you see here. Trying to prioritize where I'm spending my time and, my exposure levels, and, haircut just hasn't quite made the cut. So, hopefully that's not too distracting for you. All right. So as we get into it here, like I said, I want to talk to you today about data, and specifically, how you as an individual or an organization, think about data in a more holistic way. A lot of times we focus on reporting, or we focus on a data conversion exercise, or some other small aspect of data, but we don't necessarily think about it, holistically. And so that's what I want to consider here, and that's kind of what we're talking about in the title. Whether we're using it as jet fuel, accelerating our progress through an organization, or we're using it as quicksand, or it's using us as quicksand and slowing things down and bogging us down in the process. And so, as we get into that, we're going to take a look at, how we can think about data in a different way. Okay. So, I'm sure everyone here has heard the stats and the figures around data, that there are billions and billions of records of data being created every day, if not trillions or more. The numbers are astronomical. They're increasing every time I see a new slide with those figures. It's higher and higher. And honestly, at this point, it just you kind of numb to it. Right. So I'm not going to talk about that. I think everyone is aware of those facts, those figures, that information. And instead, I want to talk about, what we're doing with that data. There's obviously lots of data out there. It's out there. It's available. It's in our organizations. But what are we doing with it? How are we handling it? How are we approaching using that data, leveraging that data, getting value out of that data? And so instead of talking about some statistics around data, I want to talk a little bit more about how organizations are using that. So, one thing that Accenture does is we go out and we do studies. So we study, survey senior executives and ask them, on a variety of topics. And one such study that we've done recently is around how organizations are using data, how they're leveraging data within their organization. And I think the results are really, pretty exciting. So, one of the things that we found, and there's four kind of key results, that have come out of this survey. And some of them are expected, and some of them are pretty surprising. Actually, one of the first couple here are pretty surprising. At least they were to me. The first one is the skills and tools that are being used in an organization. Over 55% of organizations are leveraging completely manual processes for how they handle data. So it's the old Excel-based. I've heard it referred to as dump and pivot. Completely manual. Extracting data into some sort of spreadsheet or manual process, and handling that process completely manually. Over half of organizations, a completely manual process. Now, that's a lot. That's a lot of work to handle your data, and it's a very inconsistent way to handle your data. Another, what I thought was very surprising statistic was that only a third, well under half of organizations actually trust their data, holistically enough to be able to believe that they can derive value from that data. That's shocking. These organizations have, vast quantities of data, financial data, human resources data, marketing data, and they don't feel like they can trust it, at least in a holistic way. That's very concerning. The next area which we found is one that unfortunately I don't find very surprising, but it's still concerning. Data silos are still a very real problem, and it's something that we run into all the time. And only 16% of organizations have any sort of process in place to work across different data silos to pull in data into more of a consolidated, consistent data store, so they can use that in an integrated fashion. And lastly, again, I think this is a fairly commonly known fact, but over 80% of data scientists' time is spent on actually doing data science work. The 80% of their time is spent on cleansing that data, preparing it, addressing the data quality issues that we've been talking about, and only 20% of that time is actually spent on doing data science work. So, the value that you're getting out of those data scientists is really minimized because of the amount of data cleansing and data preparation work they have to do. And it's not to say you're going to completely eliminate that. There's always a need to modify the data and model it in a way that serves your particular scenario, but spending more of that time, 50, 60, 70% on data science and not 80% on data preparation. And so, I think as we look at this, it's easy to make an assumption that, well, that's great, but the value we get from the data, the value that we would get from implementing some of these changes, it's somewhat theoretical. So yeah, it might be nice, but we have problems in the here and now. We're doing an implementation. We're implementing a cloud ERP, and we need to focus on the here and now. Well, the interesting thing here is that that problem comes very real. What we found, and I think a study that a partner has done, has shown that 40% of SaaS implementations don't meet their business goals, and the number one reason that they don't meet those goals is because of data-related challenges. And so that becomes very real, very tangible, very quickly. If you're not meeting your business case in your implementation, SaaS or otherwise, then you are not getting the value out of that. You're spending money on that, and you're potentially not benefiting as much as you could be. Some other statistics around that. 3/4 of organizations, aren't able to measure tangible value from their data work, be that reporting, data conversion, other sort of data projects. Likewise, only 1/4 of them have been able to produce meaningful, actionable insights out of their analytics projects. And lastly, it's a priority across the C-suite. Again, this is a consistent thing we see, and it's increasing every year as we do these sorts of studies, that we see that getting value out of your data, increasing your speed to insights is a priority. So this is not some sort of ethereal, hypothetical problem. This is a very real problem that has very real consequences, very real financial consequences for not addressing it. And we see that time and time again with our clients. A specific example I can give to that is a client where we were doing a large cloud ERP implementation, and the overall program went very well. This was a large global media company. Everything went smoothly. But as we were getting to the end of the implementation, the CFO came to our team and he said, everything's great. I'm happy. Like, everything's gone well, but I don't feel like I've gotten anything out of it. Like, for me, I don't have any additional visibility into my data, into how the organization is performing. Everything's being managed transactionally quite well, but I don't see anything holistically that I wasn't seeing before. And we said, what, you're absolutely right. We can do something about that. And so we proposed a pilot using Oracle Analytics Cloud, and we pulled together a CFO dashboard. And since then, that's gone on through several other implementations. We pulled in some planning and budgeting data and other things, and they really feel like they have a much better, much more holistic view of their data out of that. And it wasn't a significant additional amount of work. It was really pretty achievable, but we had to think about it. We had to focus on it. We had to make that happen. So, it's very important to think about data holistically. And so, moving beyond the theoretical, we want to look at, how we are handling data in a more tactical fashion, right? We can talk about theory for hours and days, but, what does that mean in my day-to-day? What does that mean on my project? How can I do things differently? And so one of the things that we wanted to look at is a kind of standardized view. And I've got a diagram here, and this is not intended to be the diagram that answers all the questions or covers every single base or every single scenario. But what it's intended to do is to show you some of the examples of different components of a typical project. And so, what we're looking at here, and an example that we've seen quite frequently, is looking at a new implementation. Often now that's a cloud implementation. Maybe it's ERP, maybe it's HCM, maybe it's something else. But we're standing up a new system, and so we have legacy data that we need to consider. Oftentimes multiple legacy systems. Sometimes, some decommissioned, some online. Different business units, different organizations, different geographies, all over the place. Data that we need to bring together to load into our cloud system or whatever the target system is. And then, we have interface to other systems. So that might be an online thing, it might be batch. And then lastly, we need to pull the data out and do something with that. We're doing reports, data warehousing type scenarios. And we want to be able to run some sort of machine learning or AI components on that to really get additional value out of that data. And so, this is the spectrum. And I think all too often what we see is that people focus on very small components of these things. Maybe it's the data conversion exercise, pulling data from legacy, loading it into the cloud. Maybe it's reporting and analytics. Maybe we're just focusing on that small segment. Maybe it's, wanting to do a machine learning or AI type implementation and focusing on that in isolation. But what we found is that, these things are all connected. They aren't independent. They all work together. All the data flows through. And so if you look at them independently, you really miss out on a lot of the advantages of taking a holistic view. So for example, we will talk in a second here about an asset that we've built to help extract data, prepare it, get insight into it, and then load it into your cloud application. We also have assets around pulling data out of the cloud, because that's a brand new world now when it comes to extracting data. It's not the old database on premise that you can connect to and pull your data out. There's a lot of different mechanisms and methods and technologies that are in play there. And so it's very important to understand how that works. But likewise, the data that's flowing through, if we haven't addressed the issues with it, that data is going to have data quality issues, which is going to slow down our process. We talked before about how data scientists spend 80% of their time, and they're way downstream. So you can think about all the work that could have been done before the data had gotten to them in order to prepare that data and allow them to focus on actual data science tasks. And so this is how we're looking at this and say, okay, well, instead of focusing in pockets here and there and little areas within that, let's focus on this holistically. Let's take a holistic view, of this data landscape that we have and figure out how we can work it together in a way that will benefit all the different aspects of that and really pull it together. So, the iceberg analogy is probably overused, but I think it's very, very valuable here. And I want to call out two specific statistics that we talked about on the previous slide. And those are, 28% of companies being able to realize tangible value from their data projects, and only 27% being able to produce actionable results out of those projects. Those are very, very low numbers. We should be able to do better than that. We should be able to produce more. And I think the reason why we're not able to do better than that is because we don't realize that there's a foundation, or if to use the iceberg analogy, a huge chunk of the iceberg, under the surface that needs to be built out before we can really achieve those results. And once we have built that foundation, then we can build on top of that. So I think it's essential that we focus on building that data foundation. That starts at the very beginning of the program, or embedded kind of across the organization, in order to build on top of that and quickly produce results and actionable insights out of our data projects. So we talked a second ago about an asset that we've built. I want to talk to you a little bit more about that today. So we're calling it our data services platform for Oracle. It's a bit of a mouthful. We probably need a better name than that. But the asset itself is really pretty cool. As we saw in many different implementations that we were doing, we realized that there was a real gap in what we were being able to deliver for our clients because of the challenges around data, especially around loading data into a cloud ERP or cloud HCM solution. And that clients were spending a lot of time, manual effort, extracting data, profiling data, cleansing data, loading data, validating data. It was a very time-consuming process. It often went very poorly. It often was behind schedule. And so we said, you know what, we can accelerate this. We have the tools, we have the technology. You know, Oracle's platform has enabled us to do this in a much more efficient and faster way. And so we built out this platform that enables us to do this much more efficiently. And so just a quick overview of that platform. There's kind of three main functionalities that are built into this. One is around data quality. So we've got a number of business logic and technical rules built into the platform, you know, already pre-integrated, there to, you know, be run on your data as soon as it's loaded. You know, we've built in, you know, fuzzy matching, natural language type capabilities, predictive capabilities to be able to make that process faster and more efficient. And, you know, we've also built in the capability to actually update the data, make changes to the data, you know, where we need to do that manually, either individually or in bulk, rather than trying to run it in a separate process. So it's all in one location. Second is around data discovery. So one of the things that we've found for a while now is that it's really important to understand your data. You know, if you just take it blindly and you just assume, you know, this is vendor data, it's vendors and addresses and some other stuff, and we're just going to chuck it in the cloud, you know, that doesn't always go well. And sometimes there's opportunities that we miss out on. And so, you know, being able to look at your data, understand some of the characteristics of it, and then be able to iterate on that is very important. And so we've built out kind of a basic profiling capability within the tool itself, and then we've also put OAC using the data visualization capability on top of that. So you can interact with that data, you know, mash it up with other data sets and really get a better understanding of that data, and hopefully leverage that information, you know, into the program itself so that you can make better choices around your data and how you're using that. And lastly, data archival. So this is a, you know, more technical element of it, but, you know, a big challenge that we found is that, you know, these conversions are often produced in files, and they're often very large. You know, we've got clients who have, you know, 50, 100 million or more records in a, you know, a vendor file or a supplier file or an item file, and there's often multiple iterations of these, and so that becomes pretty cumbersome to manage, especially when, you know, it's being loaded via an individual's desktop or something like that. So by leveraging the OCI object storage and ADW's connectivity to object storage, you know, we're able to handle these things much more efficiently, and not have to worry about processing power or storage or memory on an individual desktop. And then lastly, this is all built on top of Oracle native cloud functionality, so Kubernetes, Terraform. You know, it's very containerized, and it's something we can take and we can stand up in a client organization in, you know, a day. So it's completely scripted and can run in their instance, so we don't have to worry about security. We don't have to worry about moving data out of their tenancy. You know, makes it very fast and easy. Looking at the technology and how it works together, you know, we pull data out of a source system. You know, that could be EBS, it could be PeopleSoft, it could be SAP, it could be something else completely. You know, for some of the more common source systems, PeopleSoft, EBS, we often have predefined queries that we can use to help pull that data out more quickly, or at least templates that we can start with. We pull that data, as I mentioned, into OCI object store, so it's being managed, you know, on a, you know, cloud scale. We don't have to worry about how big the files are or how many of them there are. We then can consume those into ADW directly without having to do any data integration or data movement, and then we can run all of the capabilities that we have in ADW, so machine learning notebooks, you know, Cloud SQL, Oracle R, any of those things, you know, directly on that data. We leverage Spark for doing some of our data profiling, looking for duplicates. Some of these are open source technologies. Some of these are Oracle native technologies. You know, we mentioned using OAC to build on top of that dashboard so that we can see the data and interact with it more. And then lastly, we integrate it with our other assets. So we've got assets that can load data into the cloud automatically. We've got assets that will validate data that's been loaded in the cloud. We've got assets that, you know, pull data out of the cloud and build analytics and reporting on top of that. So this is all integrated together to enable us to really get the value out of the data in as quickly a fashion as possible. So I want to show you a quick demo here. We're not going to go into it in depth, but I'll just do a quick demo of this asset so you can see what it looks like, see that it's real and we're not just making it up, and see some of that functionality that we've built out.
This is the Accenture Intelligent Data Platform for Oracle. Here we have the ERP modules loaded, suppliers, customers, and items. We'll first look at the Insights module for suppliers. Insights gives us basic statistics about our suppliers across the top of the screen, number of suppliers, sites, etc. This helps us validate that the data loaded is as expected and helps us identify any discrepancies. We also have more in-depth information about the suppliers, active versus inactive, and supplier types. Here we can see that a large number of employee records have been loaded as suppliers in order to pay expenses. These will not need to be loaded in the system going forward. Additionally, we can see the breakdown of our top N suppliers by the number of invoices or the total amount of invoices. Here, interestingly, we can see that almost 70% of our total invoice value is being paid to the top 20 suppliers. This may represent an opportunity to reduce the number of suppliers that are used going forward. If we look at our profiling results, we can see that across all modules, 63% of the rules, both embedded as well as customized, have been passed. And for suppliers specifically, 75 are being passed. If we click on supplier, we can see the breakdown by rule type. And if we click on the rule type, we can see the breakdown even further by subtype. If we scroll down, we can see that the number of rules being passed is sorted in ascending order, so we can focus on a particular value and see which rules were not passed and identify if we can make updates to those records or not. So for example, taxpayer country is missed, so we'll click into the value here. And here we can make updates to these records. We can delete records, and we can make changes, and we can do it in bulk or on an individual level.
Lastly, I want to leave you with a tale of two clients here. So my play on Charles Dickens here. So we had two different clients, and these are both real situations, real scenarios, real projects that we were implementing. They were both HCM cloud implementations, but they took very different approaches how they wanted to handle their data work. Yeah, the first one, deprioritized the data work. They said they wanted to handle it internally. They didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. And the second one said, we're gonna focus on this. We're gonna build a team out as a dedicated team of combined Accenture resources and client SMEs who understood the source systems, and we're gonna make sure that's baked into the timeline and the schedule. So client one hit challenges immediately. Their legacy systems, were old. They had an old SAP implementation, and they couldn't figure out, how to get to the data they needed. They get some of the data out, but they couldn't figure out how things were related. They didn't have dedicated time from the necessary SMEs to be able to really understand how to get those queries to work. Client two was prepared. They had those resources dedicated, time dedicated from those resources, and they were able to quickly run those queries, get the data out, and get it loaded into the data platform. And from there, they were able to process that data without spending a lot of time on that process. Back to client one, once they got their data extracted, they had a lot of data quality issues, and they went through very manual processes of looking for duplicate records, which sounds simple, but when you get into the details, it can get very complicated. They saw things like employees with missing manager records, and they had to go back and kind of manually try to figure out how to repopulate those values so they could load it into the cloud. Client two, on the other hand, was able to use the pre-built rules that we had in our data platform, and from there was able to quickly profile. They ran over 900 business rules in just 4 days. Automated profiling allowed them to quickly develop the additional rules that they needed to validate their data and address any issues that they had. Because of all the issues, client one, had to go through many mock conversions. They had only planned for a few, and they ended up taking 2 or 3 times as many mock conversions as what they were anticipating, because each time they tried to run it, they ran into additional issues that hadn't been addressed. Now, it's hard to pin down exact numbers on these things sometimes, but our estimate was that they incurred additional costs of well over $1 million as a result of the lack of preparedness for that particular exercise. Client number two, it was boring, which is exactly how we wanted it to be. It was planned for, it was in the schedule, it was in the budget, and while the upfront cost might have been a little bit higher, the overall costs were significantly less, and their timeline was not impacted. So, what I want to leave you with here is the title of the presentation here. Jet fuel or quicksand. Do you want to leverage your platform and your data to accelerate your business and to gain additional value out of your data, or do you want to be bogged down in it? I mean, we obviously don't want to, but are we going to let that happen? So please think about that. I hope you will take something out of this and be able to quickly leverage that in the future. And I think we will open it up to Q&A. Thank you.